morning. This is Occupational Therapy with Kim and Jen. I'm Kim.
I'm Jen.
And I'm here in Tennessee, and Jen is in
Michigan.
And we are here to talk to you today about sensory processing disorder, and we are going to focus on the proprioceptive sense. It is our favorite sense. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of great information to give you. You might want to take a second to grab yourself a pencil and a pad of paper before we get started.
And a cup of coffee.
And a cup of coffee. So we'll give you a couple seconds there. We're not going to spend much time talking about what sensory processing disorder is today or how to detect it in your child. We'd like to refer you back to our video on sensory processing, understanding the tactile system. That'll give you a lot more details on that. But I do want to, again, encourage you to start looking at your child differently. We're going to talk about that in every video, because in order to really understand what is going on with their sensory system, you have to calmly sit back and watch them and try and figure out the relationships between what happened and what the behavior is. So when we're talking about proprioception, it is input from your muscles, your tendons, and your joints. Most of us have a lot of fun with proprioception. It is, if you go play tennis, if you play golf, if you like swimming, if you like jogging, lifting weights, running, eating, because that's all input from your muscles and joints, that is your proprioceptive system. It's also the system that we can use when our kids are having a bad sensory day with any of their senses. We can engage them in proprioceptive input, and it is going to be the calming sensation. So we're very excited to talk about that today. Jen, do you want to get us started on a little bit more about hyposensitivity and sensory seeking with proprioception?
Sure. So this sense is the one that not only tells us where we are in space, but it gives our muscles and joints information about how hard or how soft to hold something. So if I'm going to put my coffee mug on the table, I don't want to slam it down. I want to put it down gently so I don't spill anything. And it's not a cognitive thing. My muscles and joints have some memory in there from repetitive activities, and it just remembers how to do that. So you will sometimes see kids. So as Kim said, we're going to be detectives, and we're going to watch their behavior. And we're going to see those kids that have difficulty putting things down gently, or they get way close into your space because they don't understand that space. Or if you go to play ball with them, they have a ball and they are 2 feet from you and they whip it really fast. They're not trying to be mean. They're not trying to hurt you. Their body just does not understand the distance and the weight of the ball compared to how strong or how hard they need to throw something. These are the kids that are bumping into walls or bumping into people or falling out of their chairs or stomping instead of walking. You could be somewhere and hear a child walking down the hall and say, oh, that must be so-and-so, because of the way they're walking. For us, an example that I like to use is if you've ever rented a car, or if you get into a different car, if you take your friend's car, your husband's car, your wife's car, whatever, and you go to put on the seatbelt and you like jerk it because you're so used to using your seatbelt and it's just this smooth movement, and you haven't figured theirs out. It just takes a couple of tries, our muscles get it, and then we do it. Or if you go to brake the car and you're not used to their brakes and you like do this slam on the brake thing. So it takes your body a little bit of time to figure out how to adjust and use your muscles so that you're not using too much force or too little force. So these are the kids that also, they look clumsy. They have difficulty with sports. They might be the kid that on the playground prefers to sit down on the sideline or walk around as opposed to climbing on the equipment and getting involved with that, because they're just not always sure where their body is in space. So Kim and I have talked about this a little bit, and we think that the best way to go through this is to separate the kids into avoiders and into seekers. So those kids that are seeking sensory or proprioceptive information and those that are avoiding the proprioceptive information. Anything else you want to say before we?
Yeah, and I was thinking of a couple more examples of kids that really don't know where their bodies are in space. They're the kids that you give them a crayon and they either color so hard the crayon snaps because they just don't know how much pressure to put through their muscles and their joints, or conversely, they color so lightly that you can't even see it. Or the child that you're trying to teach, the 2-year-old, you're trying to teach how to drink from a lidless cup, and the water goes all over the place because they don't know, they're not getting information from their muscles of how that arm is rotating. You set up an obstacle course, and those poor little kids are the ones just banging off of everything. So as Jen said, they don't know where their bodies are in space. They could be sitting in a chair and don't even realize that they're kind of leaning over. That ties into a couple systems. We'll talk about the vestibular system, which is the movement system, but it also uses your muscles. Do I know that I'm leaning over? Do I know how to pull myself back up? If I'm in preschool and I'm walking in line and the kids in front of me stop, am I going to get information from my body to tell me to stop right away? These kids don't. They just continue to fall right into the kids that are in front of them. So it could cause problems at school, and a lot of times, parents don't really understand what's going on, and the kids get in trouble for banging in other kids, and it's really, they're not getting enough information into their muscles and joints.
And they fatigue easily. So even after a therapy session, they are pretty exhausted. So it's really hard to concentrate and do any schoolwork because their body has just been through a huge workout. So they often look like they're lazy or that they just don't want to do anything. And really, it could just be that they're exhausted.
Right.
All right. So let's go with sensory avoiders first. Does that make sense? You want to start?
So your strategies for your avoiders, you want to give these kids a lot of physical sensation so they feel their bodies. One of my favorite things to do is get a little 2-pound or 3-pound weighted muscle ball. They're full of sand, and the kids love that. They love that at 18 months on up. They pick it up, they think it's a regular ball, they get the biggest smile on their face because it's heavy. When they pick that up and it's heavy, it gives more input into the muscles and joints so they can feel it. You can play ball that way. They can kick it that way. They can put it a little stroller and push that around the neighborhood if they want. They can pick it up, put it in a little basketball hoop. Sometimes those kids, I'll have little weights that I put on their wrists and their ankles so that when they're moving around, they feel more. Those are the kids that I love to get swimming. I love to put them on the middle of the steps going up to a slide, so they've got to use their bodies to climb up, because some of those kids avoid doing playground activity because they don't know what to do with their little bodies. Jumping is a great activity to get input into your muscles, joints, and ligaments. So we try and do a lot of jumping. It's hard for those kids to jump, and it takes them a long time to jump. Jumping forward, jumping in place, getting obstacle courses going, running from one end of the room to put a puzzle piece into a board, coming back on this end. You get another obstacle course where the kids are having to jump, the kids are having to roll, the kids are having to spin. So moving their muscles more energetically, for sure. And when you're talking about giving proprioceptive input, you could do whole body that we just talked about, or you can do input into the oral motor through eating, or you can do fine motor. Some of the ways to activate the fine motor proprioceptive sense are Legos. Any resistive toys. Legos are great. Pop beads are great. Connects for Kids are great. Play-Doh. I love to have the kids coloring with a vibrating pen because they get a lot of input into the hand that way. Finger painting, painting through shaving cream. Take it away, Jen.
It's endless. And so Play-Doh is one way to do it, and hiding little toys inside the Play-Doh. But if Play-Doh is too easy, you can move to Theraputty or Aaron's Thinking Putty. The Theraputty comes in different colors, so it's more resistive. So we want to give them more and more resistive. I like tug of war kind of games. I like those little pop accordions that they have to pull apart really, really hard. Like Kim, I love obstacle courses because you can build so much into them. So for a kid that's maybe really good at jumping, so he is jumping all over the place, I might put him on a hippity hop where he has to jump even harder. So I'll use resistance bands, TheraBands to make little games where they have to be maybe on a scooter where they have to pull themselves or hold on to one of the TheraBands while I have one and they can pull themselves forward or push themselves, or they hold on to a hula hoop. Jump rope is another great activity to get them jumping. And jumping over a 2-inch beam is different than jumping over a 6-inch beam. So if they're really good at the 2-inch, bump it up. And if they're really good at the higher one, at the 6-inch, have them hold that weighted ball and then do it. Or have them pick something up and jump over and then throw it into a hoop. So just keep increasing the challenge for the kids so that it's a just right challenge, so that each kid is getting their own graded input, if that makes sense. Even for coloring, I like kids to color on their belly, but I also like them to color on their, like up on a vertical surface, so that that shoulders really has to remain up high for a long period of time. That kind of fatigues them a little bit. When I think proprioception too, I also think this is the sense that we know where our body is in space. So if we can complete an activity with our eyes closed, that tells me that my system is working. So for example, standing on one leg, something that we know how to do, standing on one leg, doing jumping jacks. So I often have kids do things with their eyes closed, just so that they can get a better sense of where their body is. So when they're little, I love finger plays. I love finger play songs. But one of my favorite ones for this kind of kid is the wearer's thumbkin. So their hands behind their back and they're getting their hand all ready to show me where their thumb is or where their pointer is. And they have to move their hand so they know which one it is, and they're not using their visual system. So that's a great activity, especially for the little ones. Pulling a weighted wagon. If you go for a walk around the block and put anything, even another child in the wagon, and this is your kid will be the one that pulls them. You think about any other games? Because I have a whole list of chores.
Yeah.
Love
I was
chores.
thinking how difficult stable postures are for these kids. A lot of the time, they're always, you might see them and they're flailing around a little bit or moving around a little bit because standing in a stable position is so hard for them. So I make sure that when we're playing, that we're playing in different positions, whether it's tall kneeling, where both knees are bent on the ground, but their trunks are up, or half kneeling, or standing on one foot. Kicking a ball is a great thing. Walking on uneven surfaces, going to a playground and having to walk on an incline or a slight decline. You see that in playgrounds. Those kids will freeze when they stand up at the top of something that goes down like this. And that's a good sign that they're having some postural instability. Or some of the playgrounds where there's like a little bridge and it kind of moves when the kids walk on it, it kind of wobbles. That's another great thing to get them on. Trying to think of anything else for.
We could do animal walks. We could do yoga poses. If they're in their little, we call them crab walks. They could do crab walks, or maybe they could kick a ball while they're in that position.
Wheelbarrow walking.
Bear walking, the animal walks.
They walk with their hands. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I even have the kids hold weights. So if we're a bird per se, and they have little 1-pound weights in their hand and they're flapping, that'll give them that much more information.
Yeah.
And at home, I'm sure you're already doing it, the rough house play. Kids love that. So when you play chase and you grab them and you pick them up and you hug them really hard and then throw them on the couch and do it all over again, that is great for perceptive information.
Right. And Jen talked about the yoga. I do yoga a lot with kids. And they can start, about 2.5. They love the downward facing dog. They like the little baby pose. They get a big kick out of doing that, especially when, you're doing it with them or other family members are doing it with them. And then you can also get proprioceptive input through what you chew. And we do it all the time. If we're kind of upset about something, we're stressed out about something, I don't know about you, but I want a bag of chips because all of that crunching is very relaxing, and it is to children as well. So whether it's like dried fruit, carrots, celery, apples, anything that they've got to chew a lot, suck a whole lot if you don't mind them to have a sucker, even a sugar-free sucker, a crazy straw, a coffee straw where they've got to suck a lot, because you're getting a lot of input into your jaw, and that is very soothing and very calming as well.
Yeah, so I thought of some other ones, of course. So tearing paper for those little muscles in your hand, the little intrinsics in your hand, tearing paper. And if you have it folded twice, it's even harder. And for cutting, save those cereal boxes or the Amazon boxes and have them cut through cardboard, because they have to work that much harder to get those scissors going and working. We just really want to push those muscles kind of to the limit, so that they get better body awareness, and then in turn get better coordination, get better fine motor skills, get better gross motor skills, get better balance, so they can have a better idea of where their body is in space.
Yeah, and I didn't want to fail to say I like to do a lot of squatting and standing and turning. It's a lot of different movements that kids really have trouble with, and at the beginning you will see them fall all over the place. Let's say you had a little toy chest here, and you had some toys on the floor. You wanted them to pick the toys up and turn and put them in the toy chest. So they've got to squat, pick it up, stand, and rotate. You might find the first couple times they do it, they're sort of falling all over the place. A month later, they're much more coordinated. So this takes time, this takes practice, this takes repetition, this takes exposure. They will get better with their posture and their balance and their skills.
Repetition is key. And when I do my obstacle courses, they go through it several times, and I might tweak it just a little bit just to make it a little more challenging. And one of my favorite things to put in an obstacle course is a tunnel, because I love crawling and pushing a ball through a tunnel that just fits through the tunnel. So they really get some resistance while they're pushing through. That's another idea you can add.
Yeah.
You'll have fun with this. This is a really fun system.
It is fun, and you're doing proprioceptive activities with them, and it's going to make you calm.
Yeah.
It's great. Well, let's talk about our sensory seekers.
So our sensory seekers, so sometimes they look like they are out of control. They are pole vaulting off of the monkey bars and the back of the couch. Sometimes they are biters or hitters or kickers. And it's not so much that they are being mean and nasty and have bad behavior, but they're craving that input. And they get a lot of input when they do those things.
I often see those kids, because Jen and I both work in homes a whole lot, and we're on the floor all the time. We wouldn't know a chair if we saw one, other than right now. But these kids, a proprioceptive sensory seeker when you're sitting on the floor and they come over and literally climb on top of you. So you know what I'm talking about. If you have a proprioceptive sensory seeker at home, they crawl on top of you. They are so close to you, it's almost like they want to get inside of you. They're all over your arms and your chest, and they're in your face, and they're knocking your chin up, or they're getting on top of your back. Sometimes they get so excited that they're almost shaking, and they'll grab you or maybe even hit you a little bit, because they need that harsh sensory input. So it can be a little rough on the caregivers.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll see these are the kids that are chewing their shirts, or chewing the top of a pencil, or chewing a toy that they shouldn't have in their mouth, something that is maybe like a hard block that is giving them tons of information.
Like erasers. They like to chew erasers.
Sponges.
Sponges, yeah. They like to run places. They can seem impulsive. And parents will say, they never listen to me. It's not that they're intentionally not listening to you, but they're getting so much input and so much gratification from that input, they're not able to tune into you and receive that input at the same time. So when your sensory seeker is seeking input, they're not able to tune into you. That's really important for you to know. And in future videos, we'll talk about ways to get their attention when this is going on. But Jen, let's talk about some ways to give our sensory seekers input so they can slow down. The whole goal of this is to get them into what we either call the calm alert state or the green light state where they're calm and they're relaxed so that they can attend to you. They can play, they can develop their skills, develop their language, develop their social skills. Because if all they're doing is sensory seeking, they're missing out on those opportunities.
So these are the kids that are already showing us with their body what they're craving. They're already bumping into things, jumping off of things. So we want to increase the intensity of it. And we mentioned a little bit, like if they were going to jump over a block or jump over a hurdle, have them hold a ball, have them hold a weighted ball, or have them increased intensity in terms of, we could put the ankle weights on them or the wrist weights on them. But the other thing I like to do with these kids is to have them slow their body down enough so that they can have some success, because they are often the kids that get yelled at. They're often the kids that are told to sit down and stop doing this and stop doing that, and you just hurt me. And so they're getting a lot of information, but not necessarily information that their body needs. So these are the kids that I like to give chores to that match their craving. So these are the kids that are going to drag the garbage can down to the road, or maybe they're going to pull the hose out to water the garden or wind it back up. Or if you lived in an area where you had animals, they could carry the heavy water buckets or the wheelbarrow filled with wood. Or if you're going to do a fire, they're the kids that are going to carry the wood for you. Maybe they can carry the plates to the table. Lots of heavy work. The milk into the house. The cans, have them stack the cans up on the shelf because they're nice and heavy. So I love chores for kids because it gives them a sense of independence and responsibility, and they're helping out as part of the house, and they're getting the input that they need. Do you have other ideas?
I do. So with these kids are so fun. Because I love the active kids. I really do. I think they're a blast. You just have to know how to give them that input so that you get their attention. So sometimes you can do, and you'll hear this in other videos, what's called a sensory diet, where you set up some kind of structured sensory play, like Jen was talking about the obstacle course. So your child's going to do an obstacle course for 20 minutes, and they're going to get the crawling, and they're going to push a weighted ball through the tunnel, and they're going to do some jumping, and they may jump off a couch and do a crash pad on the floor. Or maybe you're outside and you're jogging with them for 20 minutes, or you're on a trampoline for 20 minutes. That may be all that sensory seeker needs to be able to come in and sit down, and maybe you want to do a craft activity, or maybe you want to spend some time reading with them, or maybe you want to do some cooking, or some seated play, or something where you feel is a little more educational, academic, engaging. And maybe you have to do those bursts of sensory diet activities throughout the day in order to get those calmer periods of time. So that's what's called a sensory diet. Or conversely, you can also just always have a sense that this child learns by doing. So as Jen was talking about, you're going to combine a proprioceptive activity with, let's say you're working on color identification. So you've got colored magnets, and what you can do is push them at the top of the refrigerator, so they've got to stand on their tippy toes and get a lot of input into their body, slide them down the refrigerator, get more input that way, stick them in a bucket. Kids love that kind of thing. I will put things out of reach on a countertop for them to have to reach and get them. But that's really fun at a refrigerator. Or you're working on colors and you've got different colors Play-Doh and they're squeezing it and you're talking about the different colors, for example. Cooking, fabulous way for sensory input. They've got to stir and they've got to open and they've got a spoon, and you can be talking about measurements. You can be talking about weight. You can be talking about color. So combine the movement with the activity. You've got Legos, a lot of resistance, but they've got lots of colors. You can talk about the colors. You can count the Legos, but they're pulling apart at the same time. So I want to combine movement. And I tell my speech therapy friends, with our sensory seekers, always have a very physical activity. You can still work on language, but you've got to keep that child moving. Sometimes, with some kids, it's a lot of experimentation. Some kids need a lot of proprioception all day long. And so I might get a backpack, like there's cute little animal backpacks that strap around in the front. Maybe you put something heavy in there, you know, a half a pound of sugar, give them a little resistance, or maybe they've got to spend some time during the day with weights on their wrists or weights on their legs. That extra resistance might be calming for them. Some kids do well with a weighted lap pad. Some kids do well with a weighted blanket. We talked in our tactile video about using a bin of beans. There's so much weight there. You could put different color magnets or different color cars in there. They stick their hand in that bin of beans or a bin of sand. They get that weight on them. It's very calming. They pull out something. You say the color, you spell it wherever you're at, and you know, in the academic piece. But combine that heavy movement with the activity, or do the sensory diet, and I think you're going to have some success.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, sometimes if I'm doing a fine motor task, whether it's writing their name or their alphabet, whatever, we'll do that and then take a quick break and do 10 quick jumping jacks or donkey kicks, and then come right back to an activity. So it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out obstacle course for 20 minutes. It could literally be 10 seconds. Done, sit back down, do another activity. We just need to make sure that they're at their optimal learning state.
Exactly.
And sometimes these kids, whether they're avoiders or seekers, they have a hard time getting in that quiet alert state so that they can learn.
Yeah. You were talking about, you know, getting up and doing 10 jumping jacks, and you can even have kids sit on these little seats called Move and Sit Juniors. They're like a little air-filled disc, I guess you could call it, and they can move on it, so they can get their input when they're sitting and they're more attentive, or they can sit on a Pilates ball. Some of them have a base to them so they could bounce. And one of my kids, the only way he could remember his spelling words was when he bounced on the Pilates ball. There was something about the movement that enabled him to focus on the academic piece. So
Huge.
anything else, Jen?
It's huge. No, but we have lots more sensory systems to go through, so stick with us. And in the description below, we will give some references to some of these activities we're talking about. And we'll have ideas for books if you're a reader. So let us know in the comment section if there's something that you're not understanding or something you want to hear more of. We are here for you, and we are ready, willing, and able to share our knowledge. We want these kids to be successful.
So please,
and we want the parents to be successful.
Yeah. So please hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you soon with another sensory topic.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.